Hello, everybody. This is Professor Rukas again, and we're about to now start our second module in our serial homicide course. And what I want to focus on, as I said at the beginning of this course, I'm not going to focus this on the mechanics of serial killing, and God knows, I refuse to make this a how-to on how to do serial killing. Information on that can be found in your textbook, and I really don't want to repeat what's there, but I want the textbook to serve as the foundation for some of the broader social issues attached to serial homicide that we are exploring in this course. And the two issues I want to tackle right now are issues of mental health and media. And mental health, I want to, again, from the last lecture, want to tackle because I really do feel, and research backs this up, that an ounce of prevention really is worth a pound of cure here. But first of all, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to think about this as you're listening to this lecture. How would you react if a friend, a child, a parent, or a relative came up and said, you know what, I'm having fantasies about killing people? What would you say? How would you react? And what's the best course of action when something like that happens? We tend to want to stop something like this when it gets started, but if someone is open and honest about it, are they really going to get help? Or are they just going to be shunned? And when looking at mental health issues in serial killing, that's a major, major question and something that we need to explore. All right? And it's something that's actually really critically important. Now, one of the big problems we have with the United States is that we've never really had a truly functioning mental health care system that helps people that need long-term hospitalization and long-term care to deal with issues of mental illness. Until the mid-1800s, there was absolutely nothing in terms of mental health care. We start then seeing the science of psychiatry and psychology starting to be developed, but still not developing. By and large, people that had mental illnesses that made them violent or schizophrenic, or for that matter, just simply out of the ordinary, were viewed as cursed. And there were very few resources that were allowed. In the mid-1800s, we start to see the creation of psychiatric hospitals. And psychiatric hospitals were at the time a major, major reform because they created a location where people could go and work with physicians and medical staff that specialized in dealing with people with mental illness. And when these were first introduced, and more importantly, they were properly funded, they actually created an oasis for people that found themselves out in society that otherwise had none. That said, the system started falling apart shortly after World War II, and there were a couple of factors that went into this. First of all, people that had mentally ill family members, and those were normally the folks that were brought into these things, tended to want to just put them someplace and forget them. More like out of sight, out of mind. And second, we see public funding being directed to other places. Or let's put it this way. A politician isn't going to make a big name for him or herself by saying, I want to go opening a hospital for schizophrenics. At this same time, we also had a movement that was gaining traction in the United States called the eugenics movement, where we would sterilize, and in many states, Virginia being the leader of this, but where we would sterilize individuals who were deemed by IQ tests to be suffering from forms of mental illness. And we start seeing forced sterilizations so that this mental illness is not carried on. And as a result, we don't see funding at levels that are appropriate, and we don't see the type of care given because we as a society decided we wanted to shun and get rid of people. When the 60s occurred, and this is actually a picture that I'm showing you from Brentwood Asylum in Life magazine, as you can see, asylums were not pleasant places. And we decided that the asylum system had deteriorated to such an extent, and that mental hospitals were such atrocious institutions, that the best thing we should do is close them and get rid of them. And we start seeing a movement into deinstitutionalization, where basically we close the hospitals in hopes of getting people out of these facilities where many times they were deteriorating. And again, I think this picture probably captures the imagery and the hopelessness of these facilities in very graphic and vivid form. That said, problem is we didn't create any solutions for it. We closed the former mental health asylums, but what we did was we released people back to their families, and many times families didn't want them, so they were released onto the streets. Now, with that, we start seeing the advent of increases in homelessness, because a lot of individuals that fit the stereotypical image of the homeless person are individuals that are suffering from terms of mental illness. And we close the asylums, we have nothing to replace them, so as a result, we now have a chronic shortage of long-term beds. Now, what was unforeseen and what was thought as a very humanitarian action, which was getting these peoples out of the asylums, unfortunately now the biggest providers of long-term care for mentally ill people are the nation's jails and prisons. And I think just about everyone would agree that prisons and jails are far from therapeutic environments. If one has someone that is suffering mental illness, a jail or prison is not going to be able to do much to solve that problem and get that person to become again a functioning member of society. What's needed is some sort of long-term, many times live-in psychiatric care. Now, this is also compounded by the fact that many health insurance companies limit the number of days that they're willing to pay for, and many public insurance plans do not offer a great deal of coverage for this. So as a result, places that do offer long-term care many times are not able to provide the level of care that an individual may need. So, question is, and this is where I want to bring the question, is, again, what would you do if somebody you knew and someone you cared about suddenly said, I'm having fantasies, and I've had fantasies all my life, very common with serial killers, that I want to kill people. Many times we actually we see them in youth and adolescence playing these fantasies out with animals, and then eventually finally graduating to a point where these fantasies are occurring with people. Should we? Now, the law does provide currently that if somebody is a danger to themselves or somebody else, they can be placed on an involuntary hold for 72 hours. And they can be held for a longer period of time if warranted. But we're not talking here very long-term care. So the question is if somebody truly is a danger, because they are suffering from mental illness and they're having their fantasies, and they're having these fantasies, should we mandate that they have long-term care? Actually, the similar question could be asked, what if someone comes up and says, and this is not the issue of this course, but the question is the same germane, if somebody's having fantasies, having sexual fantasies about having sex with underage children, Should we force them, even though they've not committed a crime, into some sort of long-term care? And then the next question that we have to ask is, if this is something we want to entertain, keeping in mind that we're taking liberty away from people that haven't committed crimes. Tough, 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 because our criminal justice system is not designed to do that. And what if someone gets it wrong? The next question is who pays for this? Should it be someone? Should it be taxpayers? Should it be private insurance companies? And what if somebody doesn't have the resources? What if a parent finds out that his or her child is having fantasies about committing multiple murders, but doesn't have the resources for care? Questions to consider. And the final question is when do we let somebody out? Do we ever declare someone that has these fantasies, but has not acted upon them as ever being cured? Tough questions. Questions to wrestle with. But if somehow we can find a solution that both protects civil liberties, is cost effective, and maybe actually is able to prevent somebody and cure them from having these fantasies where they kill people, it might be something that's very worthy of exploring, which is why I'm bringing it up in the course. All right, now, the next thing I want to take a look at is the role the media plays in both promoting serial killings and dictating policy and public reaction to serial killings. I would say that the media many times has responsibility for this admiration that we as a society have for serial killers that we don't want to acknowledge. And media can actually glorify actions that are revolting. First of all, we need to keep in mind that the media is ratings focused. And I'm sure you've probably heard this in other courses by now, but crime gets really good ratings. Nothing gets more ratings than a serial killer that pops up every few months or every few years and commits another act. And it's a crime that's not solved. The old euphemism, if it bleeds, it leads, is still alive and well in this country and very much a part of the media landscape. Okay, so problems of this, all right, and the role the media places. And this, by the way, is a headline, and I want to just have you react as to what emotions this headline brings to you. First of all, it can cause panics. We need to keep in mind that the odds of you have a better shot of winning the lotto 2 or 3 times over than you do of ever coming into contact with a serial killer. All right? That's how small of a percentage that serial killings actually are. That said, media reports can cause panics and cause people to take actions they normally wouldn't take. Secondly, media can interfere with police investigations, particularly if media broadcasts embolden the serial killers, all right, embolden serial killers, or the killer to kill more people, or that killer is looking for an outlet for some sort of fame and some sort of recognition for his or her activities. Media just serves to promote that. Another very big issue. If the media tells you that someone's a serial killer, and you're on a jury, odds are you've probably heard of the case. When a serial killer is arrested, it is posted everywhere. And I would venture to say that it creates a dynamic where it's very hard to find an impartial jury. Once the media determines someone is guilty, that person is guilty. Other issues that also have to be dealt with are the ability to inspire copycats who see news reports, or for that matter, dramatic portrayals like you're doing your first assignment on, and what will be your last assignment on CSI. And the last thing is these portrayals often take a lot of liberties. They're not always the most accurate. So with that, I'm going to close this lecture off. We will have one more lecture in Module 3. And once again, thank you very much for listening. And I realize this is a very depressing topic. But that said, I hope you have a good day. Take care. Bye.